Hello everyone, welcome back to our Porsche restoration project. Today we're going to take a look at the final sanding process, the final mock-up, some of the things we're looking for, trouble spots and how to cure them. We're also going to take a look at some different sanding products, a couple different sanding blocks, and how you can get them to work for you and really iron this car out. Let's take a look at the bench here for a second. You've probably seen this paper in one of my earlier videos. We're here now. We're at wet 600 sanding. That's really the desired smoothness we want going into paint. So a couple ways we can get there. Actually, there's a lot of ways we can get there. The popular method is just go straight to 600 grit, put a dry coat on there or a guide coat on there, and then we just grab a block about this size and wrap 600 grit sandpaper around it, like this guy here, and dip it in a bucket and start sanding. That's the popular method. However, this is not necessarily the most perfect way to do it, although you'll get some really good results with it. The problem with this method is you see the belly in that sandpaper and you see the edge wrapped around there. It's not really sharp, so you're really cutting with sharp sandpaper with a dull edge and an imperfect surface. So you got air under there, you got a rolled front edge, and you got some baggy center area. That's if you do it this way. That'll get you a pretty flat surface to paint on, but you can end up with quite a few problem areas in your paint job when it's all done, and I'll show you a couple ways that you can get around that. Okay, so what I've done is I've actually dry sanded everything first with a 400 grit. I use a 400 grit gold, and if I had my preference to dry sanding versus wet sanding, I'm going to dry sand all day long, but there is a time when you have to wet sand to get you over the line that you just can't get with dry sanding. So 400 is about maximum you can go and keep it dry. After that, it just clogs up, and you just will end up with more problems than it's worth. So I've taken this block here. This is the best block for sanding this car virtually all the way from start to finish. It's the right amount of thickness, the right amount of length. You can see I'm sticking to the other block here. So I've dry sanded with this block with 400 grit. I'm on my second roll. These are 45-yard rolls. Probably by the time I'm done with this car, right now I've got almost 100 hours in finish sanding, and I'm just getting into the wet sanding part of it. So I've been sanding on this car for days and days. There's nothing that you can get through quickly, nothing you can do in a couple of days. This is something you just want to break it down and go really slow. You can do one door in one day, and that's an 8-hour day. You take this hood here, there's going to be 8 hours here, you're going to have 8 hours in this fender, you're going to have 8 hours on the roof, and so on. It's just going to take lots of time and lots of sandpaper. But you can take a lot of the work out and a lot of the guesswork if you dry sand it first. And by doing so, what you're going to do is you're going to want to take an air hose and make a few passes with your block, and then you want to blow out the block, the sandpaper, clean it out so you're not clogging anything up, blow your surface off, and then keep going. The second your sandpaper gets dull, you want to switch it out, which means you're going to go through almost 90 yards of sandpaper if we do it this way. The advantage of doing that is 400 grit versus 600 grit. So anytime you're shaping something or cutting something, your sharper, more aggressive grit is going to do a straighter, cleaner cut than a finer grit. So I need less pressure for this 400 to do the same job as the 600. And we don't want to apply too much pressure. We just want sharp cutting teeth to do our work for us. Also in our nooks and crannies, like door jambs, trunk and engine compartment areas, you want to knock it down first by hand anyways with some 400, and then you want to follow it up with a gray. Now this is a gray Scotch-Brite pad. Here's your part number. This is equivalent to about a 600 grit. You can't finish sand with just this. In other words, you can't do those areas with just this pad. It's not going to be enough cut to get rid of the orange peel and imperfections in there. You'll have to knock it down first with some sandpaper by hand, and then follow it up with this. And that's going to do a real nice job. You won't have any problems with finished paint when you're done. All right, this guy here, don't need a dry coat or a guide coat while we're doing this. You can use a dry coat, and I would prefer the dry coat over like a spray paint to do your guide coat, because you can actually feel the buildup of the spray pattern from the spray can, and you can't feel anything with this powder. This powder is great. It's like a talcum powder, and with this you get 100% coverage in your area. I got some rubbed on here. You get 100% coverage. You can see everything. Try and focus here. All right, there we go. So you're seeing all imperfections in the paint. So what we're looking at here is a 400 grit that's been powdered. So first I've sanded it, and then I've gone in there with the powder. What we're going to do then is we're going to wet sand that out of there. If I was to use a spray can, try and get this same process done, I wouldn't have 100% going for me. I would only be random in my coverage, and it won't do as good a job, and it won't feel the same when you're sanding it with your 600 as this will. And when you're sanding this with 600 and it's sharp, you actually can feel the bite, and you can hear it. And the second your pitch changes when you're sanding, you hear that little bit different pitch, and it just feels like it's floating. That time to change sandpaper right then. So you want to keep your sandpaper sharp. If I could give you an explanation on how important it is to be sharp with your sandpaper, one thing I could think of was like, say you got a master sushi chef who relies on a top quality knife that's ultra sharp to do his thing. Now, he can do that sushi cutting and filleting and artistic thing that he can do it with that tool and that sharpness like he can never do with a mediocre blade that was dull. So you want your best tool, which is going to be this one right here for this car. And to keep it sharp, we're going to try something different. And we're just seeing here where this creates a problem here. I use a product called Sure Tape. What am I doing with my Sure Tape? I think I put it in a shop there. Anyways, this is Sure Tape. I get this at Lowe's. And this is a two-sided sticky tape. I got a little bit of a fabric in there to hold it together. And this works fine in wet sanding as long as your wet sanding water is cold. If it's getting too warm, then your paper is going to stick a little bit too long. It's going to be hard to get it off of there. So what I do is I cut some of these pieces prior to wet sanding, and then I dip my new adhesive and pad into the water, get it wet, and then I stick this on here dry, and then it's going to stick. Anything, you can be a little bit big. On there. Just hard to do this with one hand. Okay, so I stick it on there. You can see now this edge. I can cut at 600 grit like I can't cut with this baggy wrapped around edge. I can get it right on the money right there. And if you keep it cool, what you want to do when your sandpaper is dull, get it started to peel off of there and then rip it off, and you won't affect the Sure Tape. So that'll get you flat. You won't have any bags in it. You won't have any round edges, and you can cut this thing like you're cutting it with a fine knife. And that's what you want. You want a real nice cut. You want your sandpaper to do all the work for you. Light pressure, nice cutting with a nice edge. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the gaps and things to look out for there first, and then we'll take a look at a couple trouble areas. And here's my mock-up, the deck lid. It looks like it's going to work out pretty good. And this one's been pretty good through the whole process. The only problem I had here, I showed it in the earlier video, is this area here was getting a little bit tight to work out. So you can see what I've done here is I've sanded my K36 back almost to the bone there, right back as far as I can take it. And this is going to allow room, one there and a little bit here. This is going to allow room for all my finished paint materials on both surfaces to build up in there and still work without rubbing. So if I didn't mock this back up, I might have too much build on there. By the time I get too much paint on there, we're going to be rubbing and chipping, and then we're going to have to pull the door down too low, and then you're going to have your door hanging off the back end here, and it looks kind of funny. Take a look at the inside. Okay, so we got the inside all sanded out. I've only block sanded these flat areas. First I've gone over it with a 400 dry block, and then I use a scuff pad, just real light pressure, the ultra fine version, and finished over. And that should be plenty smooth for finished paint. And these areas here, these are all knocked down by hand with 400 dry, and then finished up with the Scotch-Brite. And that should be plenty smooth in there. You get a nice paint job. You won't have any sandy mark transfers with that at all. Also, this area here, guys here are really important. The light's kind of a problem. Getting in here too, these inside radiuses, these are real tough. But you can't just sand that with the Scotch-Brite and get the job done. The K36 is a little bit too hard, and the gray sanding Scotch-Brite is a little bit too fine, and it won't knock down the orange peel or any imperfections. So you'll have to hand sand it first and then follow it up with your gray Scotch-Brite, which is this one here, and your part number. And this one here, this is the one I use for all the coats up to the last finish sanding, which I switch over then to the ultra fine. So they call this one very fine, and this one is ultra fine. These are your best two tools, and so far this is my third box of red I've used on this car. I'm just about done with those. I'll use some more of this underneath and inside the engine compartment. This is my second box of the gray. Okay, so where do we go from here? Let's take a look at this side, our door gaps. Okay, so let's take a look and see how we're doing on our gaps and profiles. After our mock-up here, you can see we're just right on the edge there. And even though we've got bare metal showing, this is not a problem. I'll show you why here in a second. The main thing is that we're trying to get our shape and our gaps just right. Take a look down that bottom edge there. Get my camera to focus. Filming with my new iPhone 7 Plus. We'll see how the video quality looks on this one. But looks pretty good so far. And our door gaps here is all going to work out nice, and everything seems to be real flush. Also, you want to put these together, and then together you can sand these radiuses, get them where you need them, get the right edge on there. You don't want a sharp edge. You want a nice, slightly sanded radius. It'll be a good surface for your finished paint. Okay, right here you can see, like, wow, man, what happened there? So this really is nothing to worry about. Really what's going on is this door and the other door and some of these panels have been in the curing and shrinking stage since March of last year. So there's a lot of areas on this door that have body filler, various layers of epoxy, various layers of primer surfacer, and those take months and months and months to cure, to really find out where you're at. Now, if I came out of body work, put 2-3 layers of primer surfacer on there, sanded it up, and within the first month went to finished paint, you wouldn't see any of this. None of this would be showing through at all. You're only going to catch this if you wait it out. That's why waiting a long time for this stuff to cure is so important. So what would happen is you would finish up your panel, you finish up your sanding, everything would look really good. And then you would put your finished urethane coats over the top, and that would really just seal it up. It would seal it up really tight. It would take 1 to 2 years for these oils and solvents to work themselves to the top, evaporate, and fully cure out. It take a really long time. Once you put your urethane on there, it kind of traps it in there. It doesn't give it enough time to get out. So what would happen after a couple years, your paint would be looking really good up to about that point, and then you would start seeing this kind of stuff in reverse. It would start popping through your paint, and there'd be no way to fix it. Kind of have to live with it then. Either that, or you would have to re-sand down the car and reshoot clear on it and re-block it. That might take care of some of it, but who wants to go back to that? So you only find this kind of stuff if you wait it out. You would have thought that I would have found this in my 150 sanding, my 320 sanding. None of this existed at that time. It wasn't even here. But it's here now because of the long time waiting. So now that it's here, something we should feel good about because we can take care of it. I'm feeling pretty confident we're bottomed out on all our shrinkage and tightening up of everything going on in this car. Once I sand it now and get it to where I like it, pretty much going to stay put. What I'll do with this, we're not going to build up any more material on here because I really don't like a lot of build with my K36. I want to just have enough on there to get the job done, and that's all I want on there. I don't want layer and layer and layer, have a nice pretty white coat on there, and then start putting more paint on top of that. This thing will end up so thick and so bulbous looking you won't even recognize that it's a Porsche. So what I'll do here, I'll just spot treat this before it goes into paint. I'll hit that with some epoxy primer and then lightly wet sand that back so that it is covered. Let it dry up for about a week, sand it down, and after that she'll be ready for paint. So one of the reasons we use a epoxy sealer in our painting stage is if you're doing your sanding right and you're getting enough of it out, you're going to find bare metal spots on your edges. You're going to be burning through here and there, and that's really your gauges, your sensors, so to speak, to let you know you're right on the mark. If you try to stay away from this, here's a mark right here. Try to stay away from that because you're just too afraid you might hit bare metal. What's going to happen, you're going to end up with deformed paint. So you need to sand however much you need to sand, no matter what it looks like. You just keep sanding until it's straight and flat. If you're using wet, sharp sandpaper, you'll be able to shave the metal, the epoxy primer, and the primer surfacer all on the exact same plane. So you won't have one higher than the other because of the different hardness. Now if you're sanding with dull sandpaper, yeah, you can end up with the metal being high. That could create some problems in your finished paint. So wet, sharp sandpaper all the time, and you can work this surface right down, and you can get it exact. But this is what you're going to have. You're going to have some of these here and there. Nothing to worry about. Do I wish it was all nice and white and pretty? Yeah, but it doesn't really matter because I know I'm where I need to be here to get a flat paint job out of it. So by using the epoxy, this seals all these areas, and all the areas you don't catch, it seals. You put a 100% seal with epoxy sealer before we start putting our base coats down. That way we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. You can use a primer surfacer for a sealer coat, but problem with primer surfacer, again, it doesn't like to stick to bare metal. It will stick, but it doesn't stick as well as epoxy, and of the two, epoxy is much harder and will give you much better performance than a primer surfacer coating for a sealer coat. I can't just shoot base coats and clear coat. If this is my finished sanding right now, which it's not, we're close, but a little bit more sanding to do, I can't put my base coats right down on here because what will happen, if it hits anything bare metal, it'll wrinkle. It'll just start wrinkling right there. That's why you got to have a sealer coat before you put your base coats down. That's what that's all about. And also you have to have room for it. So start putting too much primers on here, closing in our gaps and everything getting too tight, then you can end up with some problems after you get all your paint down. The gaps are looking pretty good. Also, this fender here, take a look on the inside. You can see the large size holes there. Gives us quite a bit of adjustment when I start torquing it down. So I can see only with a couple bolts in here on my mock-up, I can line this up perfectly and pull on this here. You can see I can bring that in or out, bring that in, bring it out, and depending how I nut that down, I can line that up perfect with the door. So it looks like everything's going to work. Let's take a look inside here a second. Okay, here's the inside of our door. This whole thing has been sanded down by hand, first with dry 400, and you can get all the nooks and crannies here. Knock it all down with your dry sandpaper, and then follow it up with your gray ultrafine Scotch-Brite, and it'll come out really nice. Do all that all up in here. This is all important. I'll lay down a nice paint job. If you don't do it and you just use your Scotch-Brite for the sanding, what's going to happen is you're going to end up with orange peel on top of orange peel by the time you get your finished paint on there. I've sanded all down in here, inside that fender, inside the jamb here. It's all been sanded up. Not wet sanding in here. I'm just dry sanding, following it with a Scotch pad, and that'll be plenty smooth to do a nice job. Wet sanding really is more, if it's a block sanding thing, it's really more for flat surfaces. Okay, so close that up there. All right, so you hear me talk about quite often putting waves in your paint. What exactly is that? And if we have that problem, how are we going to get rid of it? So I've got a situation going here on this door. I've got a little bit of a wave going. I'll show you how to find it and how to get rid of it. So this door here has been wet sanded, and through my 400 grit block sanding and through my 600 wet block sanding, not enough information, even sanding in the sunlight, to see that there might be something wrong with it. The only way that I can tell there might be something wrong with it is to do a mock-up after it's sanded finish, and I got a shine on it, and I stick it in the sunlight and bounce a reflection on it. So let's see if I can get this, the right lighting here. What we're looking for is we're looking for a perfect reflection. The most perfect thing I can see here would be the palm trees. Okay, so you can see right now we've got a palm tree reflection. You can see the trash can in the door. So I'm going to move this camera up and down, and you can see the palm trees. It looks like a pretty good, pretty clean reflection. As I'm moving down, I'm almost to the bottom of the door. That palm tree and trash can haven't hardly moved at all. That's what we want right there. We want that across everything, especially on big flat areas. Now, what I found on this door, take a look and get a better, different angle. I'm going to move this way with the camera. You see that reflection right, pulling back, right down a little bit, right in there somewhere, right there. You see the palm tree move? You see how it just kind of wiggles? Yeah. Very hard lighting to see this in. Really important that I show you though. Okay, here we go. There it is. You see we just got a little bit of a wiggle in there. Right there. See that door? Yeah, it's popping out. Now right there is what I call waves in the paint. It's just pulling on it, and it's so thin. How much mil is that? Oh, if I was to take a guess, maybe 1 to 1.5 mil. Right there is a wave. I'm going to get rid of that. So how are we going to get rid of that? I can't get rid of that with a small block. There's no way, because that location is right about in here. If I use a small block, really all I'm going to do is just keep sanding the wave. What I need is at least a 24-inch block so that I can span the length of this door and bridge that hollow spot. I don't have a 24-inch block. I think my friend Mike, my buddy with the Mustang project, I think he's got one, and I'm going to borrow it to clean that up. What I'll do is I'll pull this door back off, get it on some horses, re-dry coat it, and then take it down with a 400 grit and a stiffer block and see if I can't get it out of there. I think I have enough material still on here to work that out. I'm not really at bare metal yet in that area. See, I'm just starting to get through right there. So I have some area to work. Even if I can work out half of that distance, you can take care of it. I don't like to suggest this, but you can take care of it in finished paint. So what's happening is you're putting down 3, 4, sometimes 5 layers of finished urethane, depending on what's going on. And each one of those coats is 1 1/4 to maybe 1.5 mil thick. So you're 5 to 6 mil in your build with your finished coats. So you have some room. If you're almost there and if something just doesn't quite come out in your primer stage, although it's best to get it here, you have a little bit of room, a little wiggle room to work something out in your final block sanding, polishing out coat if you need to get something. If it's too big, you're not going to get it. You could end up burning through your paint and creating a much bigger mess. But in this case, this is so thin, last thing I want to do now is start adding more K36 on there. Wait another couple months for it to shrink and reblock it. It's really not what I want to be doing. I just want to sand it down, get it right, and then move on. We'll catch that. Even if I got to split it by 50%, and then take care of whatever I can't get out in the finished paint. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll look back at it after this car has finished paint and is polished out and see how we did. And then I'm finished up in here now at the Scotch-Brite sanding in here. I'm using the red to do all this stuff and scuff it up. I'm going to do everything before I start laying down paint. The last thing I'm going to want to do when I go into paint is stop and go back to sanding something. So also one last note here about a different block. This is a teardrop shape, and I had to buy this special. There's a problem area on these hoods. What happens in this inner groove here, start building up layers and layers of K36. Because it's a vertical surface, or semi-vertical, what happens is the paint slides down as it's drying, and it builds up in the bottom, creates kind of like a landslide effect, but only you're just massive buildup of material. The only way you can get back to the right shape is you have to dig it out. Hard to do with a regular sanding block. You almost need that rolled teardrop shape to get in there and reshape it. If you're sanding one of these hoods, you'll see what I mean when you start to get in here. It'll be too much build in there. But I bought that block just to clean that up, and that hopefully will work pretty good. And inside our lid here, starting to look pretty good. And now same thing in here. This is all done. It's all knocked down by hand, 400 grit, dry, and then followed up with your gray ultra-fine Scotch-Brite. And then lastly, before you go into wet sanding, you want to check all your holes here. These holes are starting to fill up. Get this thing to focus. You can see after spraying so many layers of material that it's just building up again. You want to file this out, ream these holes back out, check everything around the car, get that out of there. After wet sanding and before finished paint, you want to make sure you have room for the finished paint, and then you got a real nice sealed edge. You won't have to worry about it popping or lifting later. Okay, that's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to finish sanding this car. I'm going to do one more video after this on how to build a spray booth in a safe way, get the gases out of here, and seal it up real good. There might be some ideas in here, depending on your situation, of how to close one in. Got my barn-style doors going here. See a bumper out here. The sound in these roundings is real fun. But that's pretty much it. Let's wrap this one up and call this good for sanding process. If you have any questions on this, please by all means, drop me a comment. I'll try to help you if I can. Good luck with your final sanding. It takes a long time. You'll have 100+ hours in final sanding your car if you're doing it right. And you'll have several rolls of sandpaper. Well, thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.